Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, there's no football tonight. What the hell?
Yeah, I'm feeling strange and disoriented.
It seems odd that we have a Wednesday night game this week, but not a Thursday night game. Like, I understand.
It seems odd that we have a Wednesday night game this week.
No, everything as far as the dates are concerned, no. Actually, at this point, it's weird that we're not having a Thursday night game as a result of like a COVID thing. Like that seems more unlikely to me for some reason.
Fair enough.
Well, this episode is going to be all about the preview of the Jaguars game. We have a game to preview for this Sunday, so hope you guys are ready for that. And also, we have a fantastic mailbag. But before we get into any of that, we have a couple of good big announcements for you. First off, this year we have no physical live show, which does sadden me quite a bit. The live shows have been really fun. New York and Seattle for me, London for Arif, as well as the other two. And we wanted to do something in the spirit of, so what we're going to do is next Thursday night, Thursday, December 10th, 7 o'clock Central Time, we will be doing a live show that we will be sending the link out. It'll be a Zoom call that you can access if you are a member of our Patreon. So I will be posting the link on Patreon next week for the Thursday night game. Which I'm not even who's playing next Thursday night now that I'm thinking about it. Thursday night football. I'm actually looking up the schedule right now to see who's next. Is it the Cowboys? It's the Cowboys-Ravens game. That can't be right.
Yeah, wait. No, that's this week.
Yep, that's Tuesday. Sorry, folks.
It's the game that was just canceled.
That's the game that was.
Postponed. There have been no cancellations in the NFL this year, James. We have to recognize that.
let us be clear. That is
Patriots Rams.
It is Patriots
that'll be
Rams.
Interesting.
So that'll be interesting. Yeah. So during that game, we will be having the live show. So if you've never attended a live show or have not listened to the live shows that we put up in the past, basically what ends up happening is Arif and I banter just the way we normally do, and we end up going in the mailbag. We end up taking questions from the audience as well. So it will be lacking a certain flavor that we've had in the past as far as the live shows are concerned, but it will still be about as close as we can legally get. So looking forward to that. So again, if you are interested, you'll need to join the Patreon. $3.50 a month will get you the link. That'll be Thursday, December 10th at 7 p.m. Central Time US. Also, we will be doing a Zoom call for the January 3rd game, which is the last game of the year. That starts at noon Central, and I believe that's the game against the Lions. That's the Lions game in Detroit. So if you are interested in joining that Zoom call, it was a hell of a lot of fun. Last game that we did, we will be doing that on January 3rd. So if you have any interest in that, if you'd like to, I'll see if I can get Dusty roused for that one as well. He was a welcome addition to that one. That was, he's a dink. It's a dual income, no kid thing, and he doesn't technically cover football anymore. So it's a question of whether or not he wakes up for it. So dinks typically like to sleep as long as they can. So again, over at patreon.com/NorseCode, if you'd like access to either of these events, you can do so over there. I will be posting the stuff for it next week. For at least the live show, the Patreon Zoom call will be happening closer to January 3rd. But again, if you're interested, patreon.com/NorseCode will get you access to it. Also, if you are interested in the bonus episodes over at Patreon, it's going to be up there. Or you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode and donate there as well, just like Thomas Helly did. Thank you, Thomas. We're going to really do appreciate just the little Christmas drop there. This stuff helps, pay for things like the live show. It helps pay for things like creating a Zoom account in order to have a bunch of you on. for a live or for like a watch along thing, or ends up paying for things like if we have a computer break, or end up needing a new microphone, or end up paying for things like our hosting. All of this goes through here. So again, thank you guys so much. And if you'd like to wear an item with a Reef and Ice face on it, even though the turkey thing is a little past Thanksgiving, you can do so over at norsecode.threadless.com, and we have our merchandise up there over in the collections section. So again, norsecode.threadless.com. I feel like the shilling section has gotten longer this year. I'm not complaining, but I feel
Yeah, I
like,
mean, well, we have more stuff to shill for,
I
which
suppose,
is it the beginning of the end of the podcast?
the it's not really the true monetization. Like, nobody's selling MeUndies yet. Is that still a thing? I haven't listened to a podcast that uses the MeUndies code very much anymore.
If we could get MeUndies with our faces on them, which would be distinctly odd for thinking about, because why would you buy that merch? Why would you want my face there? We would probably do it though. We probably
That's I'm not I'm not
denying it. I know.
I said something to you the other day, and I'm trying to remember exactly what I had said to that really did. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's what it was. I asked, how do we best monetize this for our gain while still appearing to be socialists? Like,
Yes, that's exactly what you said.
that's terrible. All right, but again, norsecode.threadless.com. There's a bunch of great stuff. There's shirts. There's everything. We're not making very much money at all over there, so it's not something that we're like shilling. Hey, do this and we'll make a bunch of money. No, absolutely not. This is if you want this cool logo that Dropplay Dave did, please head over there and buy a sticker, buy a magnet, buy a cell phone case, buy a baby's onesie. Do what you got to do.
Yeah,
But
right. I don't think we've even made enough back yet to cover the cost of having paid Droplet Dave for the art yet. So
I think it's close, but I don't
okay.
think it's there yet. I think I would actually have to check what I ended up paying him for that. So yeah, I think we're getting close though. That's
All right.
funny.
We're almost close to breaking even on the merch, guys. That's fantastic.
That I don't have a good response to that. So what we are going to do, however, is go to a Jags preview that Arif taped earlier today. He was speaking with John Shipley. He is a publisher at Jaguar Report of Fan Nation, a part of the SI Network. And this was a conversation they had earlier today about the upcoming Jags game.
All right, I'm here with John Shipley, publisher of Jaguar Report of Fan Nation, a part of the SI Network. He's my favorite Jaguars beat guys. So, man, how you doing, man?
Hey, that's high praise. Thank you. I know it's one of the more illustrious beats out there in the sports world. So I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, man.
Awesome. Yeah, we're here to preview the Jaguars game. The Jaguars are 1-10. We'll take a look at like the roster position groups and stuff like that. But I just to like get this out of the way. Um, do you think the Jaguars have a hope in this game?
I really want to say no because there's no logical reason to say the 1-10 Jaguars should compete with the Vikings. Just because, I mean, even disregarding their records, if you just look at the matchups, the Vikings are they just have the edge in pretty much every matchup. And then you have Mike Glennon going against Mike Zimmer. I don't think that's a matchup any Vikings fan should feel nervous about. But on the other hand, the Jaguars have been involved in, I believe it's three games of playoff teams this year where they've lost by 4 points or fewer, and the Vikings are notorious for playing stupid games. So I could absolutely see this becoming one of those stupid set games.
Okay, yeah, no, that's actually completely fair. Heartbreakingly so. Yeah. So let's go into some of these matchups. Let's talk about some of these individual players. So first, so it sounds like the Jaguars are going to be going with Mike Glennon at quarterback. Why?
Yeah, no, I mean, for weeks the Jaguars have been saying, they wanted Gardner Minshew to be 100%, and they want him to have a full week of practice before he could get back on the field. Well, now he's 100%, but Mike Glennon is still starting, and I think a big part of that is, the Jaguars, they've had such a rotation of quarterbacks this year that once they saw Glennon didn't look disastrous against the Browns that they said, hey, is Minshew really that much of an upgrade that's worth it to switch out quarterbacks? Because after Minshew's first two strong weeks of the season, which he threw 6 touchdowns, I think just the one interception. Ever since then, his play just went downhill, and that was even before his thumb injury. And I do think there's a factor in that you have to consider the fact that he hit his injury as well. I mean, that might work at Eastern Carolina, but I can't think of any NFL coaching staff, especially one that was on the hot seat or is on the hot seat, that would appreciate their quarterback hiding an injury to their throwing hand.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So what are the kind of the differences? So like my interpretation is that Gardner Minshew and Jake Luton are both kind of high variance quarterbacks. You might be able to get some pretty good plays out of them, but at the cost of a high rate of pretty bad plays. Whereas Mike Glennon strikes me as a much safer quarterback, less likely to turn the ball over, less likely to create big plays. Is that about accurate?
In a way, I would say I'd say last year that was a more accurate kind of view of Minshew. It just seemed like this year his big play rate went down, and he went much more from a high variance guy to kind of a game manager with a cap ceiling. I think you saw Glennon and Luton have both hit some of the downfield throws that Minshew had been missing all season. But I think really the biggest difference is just how the offense operates. They're more willing to call plays, for more downfield, longer developing routes with Glennon and with Luton than they were with Minshew, simply because Glennon's more willing to stay in the pocket. Minshew, one of his best traits, his mobility and his ability to, extend plays is also one of his worst ones because he is really quick to bail a pocket. And I do think that's one thing that frustrated the Jaguars coaching staff. And Glennon will not run from the pocket because I'm convinced he's physically incapable of. He had a clear angle at the pylon for that 2-point conversion against the Browns, and in real time, it looked like he saw it, and he said, "Oh my God, why am I about to run?" and pulled the ball back and tried to throw it, and they ended up, not completing the pass. But he's either afraid of run or incapable of running, and I think the Jaguars actually prefer that.
All right, that makes sense. So, I mean, to me, I mean, I like that receiving core. Keelan Cole, DJ Chark are pretty fun, and Laviska Shenault might have a strong future. But to me, I mean, if the Jaguars kind of do anything offensively, it'll be through the run game, not just because the matchup up the middle against that defensive interior is probably fine, but also because James Robinson has been so good. But my next question actually is less about Robinson. We'll get to him in a second and more about why they have 5 running backs on the roster if Robinson's going to take 97% of the carries.
I'll be honest with you. I covered the team. I've covered the team every single day since like last August 5th. I'm not sure I could tell you all 5 of the running backs now on the roster right now. You said 5, and my eyebrows kind of raised. Like, oh, it's that many. I mean, Chris Thompson. They strangely would give him a carry now and then, I guess, just to give Robinson a breather. But he was kind of their third down back. But as the season went on, as he dealt with more injuries, he got erased from that role. Reichwell Armstead has unfortunately been on the COVID-19 reserve list all season. There hasn't really been much clarity with his situation, and there was a real thought inside the building by some that he could have been the guy to replace Leonard Fournette, or at least share touches with James Robinson. Divino Zigbo, he's played, I believe, in 3 games because of a hamstring injury. And then Dare Ogunbowale, I've said that name a million times, so I've gotten really good at not messing it up. He doesn't really do. It's going to sound mean. He doesn't really do anything for them. He'll go in there for Robinson, to give him breathers on third down, and they've even used him as a lead blocker in some like I formation stuff, which is hilarious from Jay Gruden. But other than that, I think it's a mix of injuries to several of the running backs and just the fact that other than Robinson, they don't really have NFL caliber running backs at this point because I mean they got lucky with Robinson, but I mean if you just look at the investments in these guys, it's a bunch of undrafted free agents, 6-round picks. I mean it's an analytical Twitter like dream backfield, but in reality it kind of only works with one
Okay, no, fair enough, fair enough. What has made James Robinson so effective? Because I think there are a couple of years where this level of performance would give him like some serious run at Offensive Rookie of the Year. This year, there's just too much talent among the offensive rookies to kind of give him that credit. But he has been playing remarkably well, and he got a little bit of attention for at the beginning of the season. Not a ton of it right now, but he's kind of continued it. What has been the key to that?
Yeah, no, I actually think the last month or so has been a better stretch for him than the beginning of the season. I mean, I feel like he's definitely has picked it up more in terms of breaking off those 10-yard runs. He's not going to get a lot of maybe the explosive home runs that Dalvin Cook's going to get because he just doesn't have that kind of speed. I think it's obvious when you watch him, but in terms of traits that you want in a running back, there's hard to find many other flaws in his game. I mean, he has vision. He has plenty of explosion through the hole and in short areas. Doug Marone noted that they kind of keep track of their teams, their different players' explosiveness by looking at how they perform in the weight room, and they use different science for that. And he said Robinson was right up there with Josh Allen and the other players on the team at the very top. And I think when you add in his vision and his patience, his balance after contact, and just his ability to get positive yardage, he's really everything that you could want in a consistent running back. I mean, it's just like I said. Beside the fact that he's not very fast and he ran a 4.6, 4.7, whatever he ran, it's hard to really find a hole in his game. And he just looks like a dude who was born to play running back.
All right, cool. And you wrote a pretty excellent story on him. I want to say about a month ago. We'll link that in the show notes. Following him, I think through his high school career. So let's talk a little bit about the tight ends before we get into, I think, the meat and potatoes, the offensive line and the wide receivers. There are 5 tight ends on the
Sure.
roster. They do not seem to be all that impactful. What is what's the deal with the tight end position?
Uh, well, in typical Jaguars tradition, the tight end position has been abysmal this year. Ever since Mercedes Lewis in 2017, they've gotten zero production out of the tight end position. It was kind of poetic that when they kind of unceremoniously cut him and kind of ruined a relationship with him. He went on to Green Bay. He doesn't do anything but block for Green Bay, but he went on to a team that wins a lot. And since then, the Jaguars have gotten nothing from the tight end position. I mean, they signed Tyler Eifert to be kind of that complete guy because he knows Gruden's scheme, and he's been a decent blocker, especially in space and on the edge for Robinson. He's kind of been key to some of Robinson's bigger runs, but as a pass catcher, you can just tell he's not the Tyler Eifert of old, and I think everybody could have kind of predicted that. And when you look at James O'Shaughnessy, he has not had as strong of a season as he had last year, but I think that's kind of predicted because he's 1 year removed from an ACL injury. But with that said, a lot of his inconsistencies, both in terms of getting penalties in the run game and drops in the passing game, have showed up a lot more this year than last year. Behind them, there's not really much to talk about. Tyler Davis was picked in the 6th round, but he got thrown 2 targets in a game this year where Eifert was hurt, and he has since been inactive for an undrafted tight end and another tight end. He just looks like a guy who he needs more time on the practice. He looks like one of the rookie types that no real type of offseason kind of really hurt him. And then Josh Oliver was a guy I know the team was extremely excited about. 3rd round pick from San Jose State in 2019. Really athletic guy who battled to. He had a serious hamstring injury in training camp last year, and then he fractured his back in like his 3rd game that he was actually in. So he missed all last year, and then this year in practice, I think it was one of the first 5 or 6 practices of training camp. He broke his foot while running, and he will go through his first 2 years in the NFL. I think with 3 games played. It's either 3 games or 4 games played, but 3 catches for 15 yards. So that just kind of sums up the Jags tight end position. They're either hurt, ineffective, or just past their prime.
All right, cool. Let's talk about some good players now. Yeah, let's talk about the wide receiver group.
I was a little surprised by that in question.
No, I mean, I wanted to get out of the way. We go through a lot of position groups so we can get the matchups. Let's figure out between DJ Chark and Keelan Cole. And I know that like on our lads, Keelan Cole is listed as a second string with Chris Conley starting. I don't know, if that's true or not. You can just tell me. But they seem to be kind of the primary pass catchers that create kind of some of these explosive plays. Are they going to be limited by the fact that Mike Glennon is throwing the ball now? Should there be something the Vikings watch out for? Because if I'm looking at these offensive matchups, I take a look at the Vikings' young cornerback group, and I know that they've made a bunch of mistakes even recently, even as they've gotten better. And I know that this wide receiver group, I think one could call it underrated. It seems pretty good to me. Do you want to tell me about them as well as Chris Conley and Laviska Shenault and I guess Colin Johnson, who was kind of interesting coming out of Texas?
Yeah, no, for sure. Just to clear up the who's starting, when the receivers are healthy, they have DJ Chark and Laviska Chenault. They interchange on the outside of two different spots there, and then Keelan Cole is their starting slot guy. Chris Conley will step up for any of them when somebody's injured, like when Laviska Chenault missed 3 games. Chris Conley stood in for them. I'd agree with you. I think it's an underrated group. I think if you're moving into 2021 with Keelan Cole, DJ Chark, and Laviska Chenault as your top 3 receivers. I think as a general manager or head coach, I think you can live with that. Maybe you want to round out the depth, but I think if those are your 3 starters, you can win with that. And I think one important thing for a receiving group is do they win the matchups they're supposed to? When they go against inferior secondaries, are they getting open and are they actually winning the one-on-ones that they're supposed to? And that's something the Jags have shown that they're able to do. Whether it was against Houston a few weeks ago when DJ Chark just had a massive game, or Keelan Cole's breakout game a few weeks ago against Green Bay, or even Colin Johnson this past week. They have guys that can threaten all 3 levels of the field, and I think they're a talented group. Chark's had a bit of a down year in terms of production. But that was more so, honestly, when you go through his targets, that's more so on Minshew just not being in sync with him. And I guess now that you think about his quarterback playing with a broken thumb for half his starts, that probably makes a little bit of sense. And Keelan Cole has really developed over the last couple of years. I mean, he went from a guy who, as a rookie, really athletic, great after the catch, and can make acrobatic catches, but super raw as a route runner and super inconsistent hands. And now it seems like he gets open at will and he catches everything thrown to him. So his ascension into a starting quality receiver has been really cool to see, and I actually think he's a priority for them to keep this offseason because he is in a contract year. Chris Conley, it, if catching the ball wasn't important for receivers, Chris Conley would be an all pro. I mean, the dude is massive. He runs a 4.3. He can jump out of the gym. He's great after the catch. It's just his hands are too inconsistent to ever really rely on him. And because of that, I think the Jaguars I think there's a good chance you could see this week kind of be the first week that they move Colin Johnson above Conley on the pecking order, just because Johnson was so impressive last week against the Browns. Johnson's a really big target. He's 6'6", but he has better straight line speed than one would think, and they've used him a lot across the middle. They've used him on attempts in the red zone, the kind of fades that you would throw to a 6'6" receiver, but it has literally not worked a single time. So they should probably just use him like a normal receiver, like the things that he's good at. And then Chenault, when you look at Chenault's numbers, I won't blame anybody for looking at his stats and saying, okay, he's kind of had a disappointing rookie year. But I think when you go back and look at his opportunities and what he's actually done with the chances given to him, I think he's been really successful because he's made plays when targeted and when used downfield. But only 5 receivers in the entire league have a lower average depth of target than him right now. And I'm being generous by saying 5 because one of those is Cordero Patterson. And I legitimately don't know how to how to define him, but he's really good after the catch. But you just won't see him used downfield.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, let's talk about this offensive line. So Brandon Linder, to me, I think is a pretty good player. From my understanding, that the Jaguars have actually not had a bad history at center. So that's nice to see. I think aside from that, there's a couple of up and down performances. I like AJ Cann a lot. PFF tells me that Andrew Norwell is kind of continuing, but I might be looking at players that might not even be available because it doesn't look like Norwell is
Yeah,
active.
no, he's on IR.
Yeah, it looks like he's on IR. Yeah, so you've got Casey McDermott, I imagine, playing instead of him, and I imagine he's a pretty significant downgrade. But beyond that, that interior looks pretty solid to me. I know Jawan Taylor has had some bright moments, but to me, seems like there have been some low moments as well. And then Cam Robinson has always been kind of intriguing to me. So are they kind of the reason that we've seen so much production out of James Robinson? Is there, kind of like a good offensive line here that's just been made to look bad by a scrambling quarterback, or what's the deal?
I think there's definitely merit to both of those last 2 points you just made. They've been a big part of James Robinson's success because I mean, just in terms of on the power runs and the gap runs that Robinson does so well at on the counters, they get a lot of movement off the line, especially that interior three you mentioned. Norwell and Can are both having their best seasons with the Jaguars, and I'd even argue Linder's having his best season as a pro, which he's had some really high level seasons. I believe PFF has him as the number two center right
Hmm.
now. It's him or Lindsley from Green Bay, and so their interior three has played really impressively in the run game. And then Cam Robinson, he's always kind of been known as maybe a run first left tackle, and you can kind of see why watching him because he dominates most of the time in the run game. I mean, when they get him out in space or on down blocks, he's fantastic. But in pass protection, he's much better early in games when there's still the guise of okay, maybe the running game is still a threat. Once teams can pin their ears back, he just kind of struggles, and he to me is probably an average level starting left tackle. If he gets a contract north of $10 million a year. On the market in free agency this year, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be the team to pay him that, but I could see it happening. And then Jawan Taylor, you were right. Jawan Taylor is, I'd say he's probably regressed since his rookie season. I mean, he had some really encouraging flashes as a rookie, had some really good games against some good defensive ends, but he's just kind of been the weak spot on the line this year. And I don't think anybody entered 2020 thinking Taylor was going to be the lineman they had to worry about, but it's definitely become the case. And I, I think there's credence to the point that Minshew made them look worse because of how often he bailed from clean pockets and how much he kind of moved on from his positional spot. But on the other hand, they have not been as strong in pass protection as they have been run blockers, especially on the edge. So it's probably a healthy mix of the two.
All right, so I don't know how much you've been exposed to Vikings takes on like the defensive line and stuff like that. You've been on apparently 4 Vikings podcasts at this point, so I don't know. Maybe you've kind of absorbed a little bit, but you take a look at some of these matchups along the defensive line. A bunch of no names, maybe kind of deservedly so, not really well known defensive linemen. Do you see kind of this as being a relatively clean pocket day for Mike Glennon? Are you worried about the potential for the Vikings to blitz a lot? Which some games they blitz a ton, some games they don't blitz at all. You take a look at players like Harrison Smith as blitzers. You take a look at the secondary against that receiver group, which is also pretty important for pass protection. Whether or not they get open quickly enough. And do you see there being opportunities to the Vikings to find ways to create pressure despite kind of this defensive line group?
Yeah, I do see opportunities. At left guard with Norwell out, you mentioned that. You mentioned it earlier. In his place is going to be a rotation of Tyler Shatley and Ben Barch, the Smoothie King. Shatley and Barch both do really impressive things.
Ben
Yeah,
Barch.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what got me blocked by Rovell. Yeah, Ben Barch.
Oh, I completely forgot that. Yeah, man. He's uh he's he's been something. He's a really interesting guy because just in the run game, like you can tell he needs like a year, like an NFL weight room or whatever, and he needs more time because he's a Division III offensive tackle moving the guard. Obviously, he needs some time, but in the run game, it literally seems like it's just his pure like sheer will and the kind of will that you would expect from somebody who would drink a smoothie like that kind of helps him, get movement. But then the same issues that they have as a kind of a whole unit are kind of the issues that Shatley and Barch have. In terms of pass protection, they are both the weak links on the line. So I think the Vikings have a good chance to get interior disruption against those two, whether it be, just head up defensive tackles on them or blitzing through those gaps. Barch specifically has really struggled one on one in pass protection and even against some not very good defensive tackles. I mean, he gave up a pressure to Danny Shelton with the Lions, and I don't know if I've ever seen Danny Shelton pressure a quarterback. So he's there's they got talent there. It's just they aren't the most consistent pass blocking group. And like I mentioned, if they get into a hole where they're going to have to ask Lennon to drop back pretty much every play and throw it, and the Vikings are going to know what they're doing, I think it's going to be pretty easy for them to get to the quarterback.
And then taking a look at opportunities in the run game real quick, just before we head over to the defense, where I think there's some interesting conversations to have. You see a poor defensive line that doesn't have a great track record against the run. You see Eric Kendricks, who's really phenomenal in a lot of respects, and then also two other linebackers that are just not that great against the run. Um, Still, I mean, you got Eric Kendricks, and you have probably not very many threats coming out of the passing game. Do you see this as being kind of another big day for James Robinson, like another 150 plus yard day?
I do think this sets up well to be a big day for him, partially because I think the Jaguars are going to be hesitant to kind of throw against them. For as many issues as the Vikings have maybe had at cornerback this year, I think the strength of their team is still much more the back seven than it is the front four. I think the Jaguars are going to be much more wary of Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks, etc., than they will be just lining it up and running it. So I think the big thing with James Robinson is if he gets the opportunities because he has shown that if he gets the ball enough, he's not going to lose yards. So he should have a pretty moderate day. I think there's only been one game where he's had a truly poor day in terms of rushing efficiency. So I think as long as the Jaguars give him a healthy dosage of carries and touches like they did last week, where he set a career high, I do think this sets up well. Partially because he's been their only real consistent way of moving the ball. And they've really, you see some teams, they have successful rookie running backs, and you're almost like screaming, like, can you guys please get him on the field more? What are you doing? It's gotten to the point where I'm starting to think maybe the Jaguars should start playing James, like start playing him less, like they've started to really lean into it.
Good, very, very Dalvin Cook vibes. All right, let's talk a little bit about the defense. So we'll start with maybe the least interesting group, the defensive line. Caleb Von Chason has not, I think, really exploded onto the scene. Davon Hamilton sounds like he won't be available for the game. I don't know who's going to replace him. I'll let you tell me. Taven Bryan, I think, has had one good game in his career and has tricked a lot of people as a result, but it doesn't seem like he is very good. Adam Gotsis is a name. Dwayne Smoot has had two good games recently, so that's kind of interesting. What can you tell me about this defensive line?
First of all, I loved your summary. Adam Gotsis is a name. They're stronger against the run, obviously, obviously than they are as a pass rushing unit. I mean, they have 11 sacks this year, and the two players that are tied for team leads in sacks both have just 2.5. Josh Allen, he was kind of supposed to be their guy on the defensive line this year, but he fought through injuries all year, and it seemed like right when he was finally getting healthy, he dominated Billy Turner and the Packers, and it seemed like he was finally turning the corner and going to start to have the season they hoped he'd have. He ended up having a serious injury, the week after, and since then has been placed on injured reserve. Not a torn ACL or anything like that, but they said significant enough to keep him off the field for a few weeks. And then once they lost him, they had really no edge presence. DeJuan Smoot, he's a solid player who I think he's a serviceable if he's one of your kind of rotational defensive ends. He can get after the quarterback. He can stop the run. But if you give him 50 snaps, he's not going to probably make the most of it. Devon Hamilton, I would say, had been their best defensive lineman this year. Just over the last month, I'm not sure if there's more than a handful of nose tackles that were playing better than him. But unfortunately, he got hurt late in the Cleveland Browns game. The Jaguars said it wasn't anything long term, but he is going to be out for this game and probably the next couple games after that. And in his place, it's going to be either an Avery Jones, who hasn't played in about 2 months, or a Daniel Ikuwale. And he is an undrafted free agent who's kind of rotated in the few games he's been active. And then Adam Gotsis, you kind of nailed that one. He's a really strong run defender. They've put him at the big end spot on base downs. And like when they play teams like the Titans and the Browns, who are going to run it a million times, he plays a lot. He does a good job of holding the edge and even getting back penetration to the backfield, but he doesn't offer anything as a pass rusher. And then Caleb Von Chason and Taven Bryan. Taven Bryan, he had a stronger season last year than I think people anticipated. It was much better in his rookie season, and he kind of gave people, including me, the idea that okay, he probably isn't good, but maybe he could be at least serviceable. But that's kind of all gone to hell this year. I mean, he's been replaced in the lineup by undrafted defensive tackle Doug Costin over the last month, and Costin's been much more disruptive than Bryan. It's kind of funny that both Leonard Fournette and Taven Bryan picked in the first round have been replaced this year by undrafted free agents and have been thoroughly outplayed by them. I mean, like thoroughly. It's a testament to the Tom Coughlin era front office of the Jaguars that you can get dudes off the street who weren't drafted and just instantly play better as rookies, and I do mean instantly. Chase on, he. I never thought he really had much of a chance to make an impact in 2020, especially with the Jaguars. The kind of frustrating thing with the Jaguars front office over the years is, they'll pick players and say how they envision using them, and then when they actually hit the field, Todd Walsh kind of just puts them into his same scheme and doesn't really change anything. I think anybody that watched Caleb on Chase on at LSU said, okay, that's a natural 3-4 outside linebacker at the next level. They've put him as a 4-3 defensive end, and it hasn't gone well at all. He reminds me a lot of Dante Fowler in the sense that he's probably best when you're using him to loop inside on stunts and manufacture pressure for him. That is obviously not worth using a first round pick on, but once he's in the building, you kind of gotta let that go, and just start using him, how he's intended to be used. And the Jaguars, they've tried to use him as a true defensive end, and I think he's generated 10 pressures on the season. He has 1 sack, and it came in week 2 on a stunt, as it may be. So I think they expected him to
Right.
immediately replace uh, Yannick Ngakoue, across from Josh Allen, and it has not worked. I'm not going to say okay, that's probably it for Chase On, because I do think there's a scenario where he is, at least a serviceable NFL player, but I don't think that situation's in Jacksonville right now.
All right, cool. Let's talk about something a little bit more interesting, the linebacker group. So you've got potentially one of the best linebackers in the NFL, Miles Jack, and not quite that in Joe Schobert, maybe Scobert. I don't know. I'm going to go with Schobert until you correct me. So Miles Jack had a really strong start to the season, got injured. I would say his return from injury has not been as strong as the beginning of the season, but I would also say that the PFF grades underrate how well he's played over the past couple of weeks. I think that he is a really good linebacker. But kind of what impact can he have on the game, given kind of what's around him, given that he's paired with Joe Schobert, and I've also seen it looks like there's about 4 other linebackers that have gotten at least 100 snaps. If you can tell me a little bit about them, that'd be cool too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Miles is having his best season as a pro because it feels like he's finally in the position he was always supposed to play. In 2017, he played strong side linebacker on base downs, and then whenever they went to third down, he'd slide into Paul Bezosny's spot at middle linebacker. And then the last 2 years, he was an every down middle linebacker. And it just seemed like when you put him at middle linebacker, you're asking him to think way too much, and that takes away from his natural playmaking ability, which is, be the fastest and most physical guy to the football and go make a play. And that's what he's been able to do this year. He, even though they don't have much talent around him, and even with Schobert's struggles at middle linebacker this season, Miles has been kind of freed up to be more of that free ranging playmaking linebacker at the second level. He's made several turnovers that were literally not anything to do with the scheme or the players around him. It was just him making a great individual football play, and that's the kind of player he has turned into this year. I think there is a legitimate question when they signed him to that contract extension last year of, okay, why are you guys doing this? Because he hasn't really proven to be very good. But this year he has, at least to me, kind of ascended himself into one of the top linebackers in at least the AFC. And I'd agree with you that his last few games have been stronger after his previous ones, not so much. Schobert, Schobert's kind of been the traditional big Jaguars free agent in which they get him and are really excited, and then he immediately has probably the worst season of his career. I mean, you can see like flashes of why they signed him. Against the Steelers, he had a really good game. He makes a couple really good effort plays. He forced a fumble against the Browns last week on a play like that, but he misses too many tackles, and he went from being a plus defender in coverage with the Browns to he's become kind of a liability in coverage with the Jaguars, and it just seems like maybe it's middle linebacker in the scheme because all the middle linebackers suck. I don't know what it is, but it has not worked out for him this year. And then moving other than him, Leon Jacobs started the year strong side linebacker, but he tore his ACL, I believe, in week 3, and that kind of led to them swapping picks with the Titans for Kamale Correa. And shockingly, the intra division rival that did not want to start a linebacker was because he wasn't good. he just, he just hasn't done much for the Jaguars. He's kind of just been out there. And then Quincy Williams and Dakota Allen are both really athletic run and chase linebackers. Williams, as everybody knows from that viral video of him and Christian McCaffrey last year,
Mhm.
he had a really struggling rookie year after playing basically safety in college. But the one game this year that he's gotten playing time, I believe it was against the Chargers because Jack was out and then Dakota Allen got hurt. He was actually fairly impressive in that game. I'd say the best game of his career. So if he got more playing time, I'd say he maybe be worth seeing what he can do. But that's about the ins and outs of it. They play mostly two linebackers, Schobert and Jack, and Wash is pretty strict about that. He's going to play two linebackers and he's going to play three cornerbacks, and that's about it.
All right, cool. So also Quincy Williams, I believe, brother of Quinton Williams, and Dakota Allen featured on Last Chance U, looked really charismatic, and then after that show was over, got into some legal trouble. So maybe not quite so charismatic once the cameras are off. Let's talk a little bit about the that cornerback group because I think it's pretty interesting. I want to talk about T.J. Henderson. I know he's not going to play in the game. I think he's on IR. So he started off with a really just a spectacular game to begin the season. 2 picks, didn't allow very much yardage and coverage. I ended up kind of featuring him in one of my pieces. I thought that I thought that he was just really fun to watch. And then he got victimized 2 games later by Ryan Fitzpatrick. This guy is interesting to me. He's local-ish, right? He's from the same state. What can you tell me about him?
Yeah, no, CJ Henderson was a prospect who, all throughout the season, draft season, I was like, okay, I need to be sold on CJ Henderson because I see the size, I see the speed, I see all of that, but I'm not really seeing it all put together. But then I think once he stood onto an NFL field and you could see him kind of with the speed of an NFL game, it kind of made me think, okay, I think he was just kind of bored at Florida, because he just kind of moves at a completely different speed. And I'm being serious. I mean, just both from his kind of deposition and the way he plays, and just looking at him at Florida, he looked like a guy who's kind of going through the motions because he knew he could afford to. And I haven't really seen that at the NFL level because he knows he can no longer afford to. Whereas issues have come up is he still has some issues technically, and then finding the ball in the air when his back is turned. That was an issue he had at Florida, and that's an issue that's continued now. But he's a guy who, when he gets beat, he does a really good job of recovering just because his explosion and his acceleration and stop and go is, for his size, is really outstanding. I mean, he just kind of glides through the field and he brings a lot of physicality along with that. I know he got dinged a lot for his tackling at Florida, but against Green Bay, he far out physical Devontae Adams. Forced a fumble, forced an incompletion by just hitting him, and then forced an incompletion down the deep sideline that got Adams frustrated. And that game kind of showed me, okay, Henderson is more than just like a speedy cover guy. He uses his speed and his size, and if he can clean up his kind of technical issues and his inconsistencies, I think he can be a talented corner. So I've actually been more impressed by him, seeing him maybe struggle at times this year than I was impressed by him at Florida.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's talk about cornerbacks that are actually playing in the game. So first, we need to acknowledge that Sidney Jones is, for some reason, really good. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
I've watched a couple of his games now, and he's really stood out to me as a really good player. What's the difference between him here and him at Philadelphia?
Two things. I think the big thing was for most of his time in Jacksonville, up until the last week or two, he has been healthy. He's kind of dealt with an Achilles injury the last, I believe, 2 weeks. But before then, he was probably the most healthy he's been in the NFL. And I think another big thing was just a much different scheme. I mean, Philadelphia, it seems like they play a little more off coverage, a little more reading the quarterback's eyes instead of reading the receiver. Whereas in Jacksonville, Todd Wash asked them to get up to the line of scrimmage, put their hands on the receivers, and I believe, I want to say it was Matt Barrow with ESPN put out a stat that the Jags have played the most cover one coverage this season, which is kind of surprising considering the Jaguars pass. But when you look at it, Jones and Henderson both kind of excel in man coverage because they're both physical enough and athletic enough to kind of create plays even after being beaten. So I think just a scheme change and him being healthy has been big. But I'd agree with you. I think he's been the best cornerback this year, and I've been thoroughly surprised when I saw they signed him after he got waived. I didn't think really anything would come of it. But he's been an impressive guy, enough to the point where I think they should probably give him another chance next year.
Yeah, fair enough. And then the rest of that group is a little bit less exciting. So Chris Claybrooks hits IR, which means the people that could not beat out Chris Claybrooks are now getting more opportunities, which I don't think is particularly great news for the Jaguars. Trey Herndon's had a pretty bad season. Luke Barku, I think, started the last game.
Yeah.
And while I only caught a couple of snippets, I didn't think he was bad, but it turns out his PFF grade is like the worst in the NFL. So I'm probably wrong about that. Uh, what's the what's this group of Jaguars corners going to do against Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson?
It's it's funny you mention that because if you had told me like their three starting corners from last week and ranking their performances, I would have said Barku was easily the the best one. I mean, I think he definitely.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm not crazy.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
no, you're
cool.
not. I mean, he definitely had his struggles. I'm not even gonna say he had a good game. It's just he had the best game out of three players who didn't have very good games. But I mean, considering undrafted rookie, his first start, I think expectations were probably tempered a bit. But I mean, he made more plays on the ball than any of their other corners did. And last Sunday was just kind of Jarvis Landry just kind of victimizing two rookie corners who had a combined 20 snaps before
Yeah.
Sunday. And I think him and Josiah Scott are both really interesting guys. Scott's like a slot only type. They were both really impressive in training camp. I'd say Scott was as impressive, if not more, than DJ Hayden. And it was kind of surprising when Hayden got hurt that they just moved Herndon inside instead of going to Scott. And then Barku was better than Claybrooks at every step during training camp, and they had even said when they drafted Claybrooks that they were drafting him to be a kick and punt returner and to have him figure out cornerback along the way. He lasted like 2 games as a returner before they said, okay, you know what, we're going to start you at cornerback whenever somebody's hurt. So they just kind of did a complete 180 on that. It kind of went as expected. And Barku, I think, should have always been getting snaps over Claybrooks, and now that he is, probably too late in the season to really see him do much of anything. Barku, Claybrooks, got probably about 10 games or so to see what he can do. Meanwhile, Barku is going to get about 6 if he stays healthy. But I think he has a really intriguing skill set. Led college NCAA in interceptions in 2019, but still went undrafted, kind of surprisingly. And he's also bold. He moved his entire family to Jacksonville before he even signed with the Jaguars. I'm not not exactly sure why, but yeah, no, hey,
Jesus.
he bet on himself, and I mean, it worked out, and he made the team. But he's at least a better option over Claybrooks right now. But Herndon has, like you said, has had a rough season, and then Scott, he had a really rough outing against Jarvis Landry, and I don't expect that to change this week. I mean, just going from Landry to covering Thielen and Justin Jefferson, like in your first two like real NFL games, that's just that's mean. That's like there's nothing you can do about that.
All right, and then real quickly, let's talk about the safeties. Andrew Wingard, who I guess is the better safety out of the two Wyoming safeties that are both still in the NFL. Wyoming, man. And what is it? Gerard Wilson's going to be the
Yeah.
other safety. Do you want to tell me just a little bit about them? How it can impact the passing game? Maybe give a little bit of cover to some of these inexperienced
Yeah, for
corners.
sure. As long as Josh Jones isn't, he got designated to be activated from IR. As long as he's not activated before Sunday,
Okay.
yeah, then Andrew Wingard will start at strong safety across from Wilson. The Jaguars, they've kind of had a complete kind of the safety has kind of been like the quarterback position on defense in the sense of they've had like a million different guys play this year, but it's been because of injuries instead of ineptitude on on that side. Daniel Thomas, a fifth-round pick out of Auburn, he was a really interesting, strong safety who made a lot of plays and the chances he got. I believe he got hurt in his third start and he's out for the year, which of course will lead to Wingard. Wingard, he's an interesting player because he's inconsistent in coverage, but he's physical. He's almost too physical to the sense where he started at least almost 2 fights with Jarvis Landry last week. Like he hit a receiver in the air and then like flexed over him for a
Dope.
solid like 7 seconds, and his physicality is easily his best asset because he creates a lot of pass breakups in coverage simply by making contact on the ball and drawing it loose. His angles are something that probably his biggest flaw. I think specifically him trying to chase down Dalvin Cook and taking the right angle is probably going to be an adventure to say the least. And then Jared Wilson, he he was just a guy out there in his first season as a starting safety last year, but I actually think he's been really impressive this year. I know PFF has him as one of their higher graded safeties. And to me, he's just kind of been a complete safety this year. I mean, he'll miss a tackle in the box now and then, but otherwise, he does a really good job of cleaning up the mistakes that the Jaguars make around him. And there are plenty of those, so he stays busy.
So you've got physical safeties, you've got a pretty great linebacker, Miles Jack. You've got a run first, I want to say, defensive line. The Vikings, despite having a lot of talent in the passing game, do like to run into walls a lot. Do you think that this is, but Dalvin Cook has been really excellent. Do you think that this is going to be a game where if the Vikings lean on Dalvin Cook, Cook is going to be able to generate a ton of yards? Or do you think that, given the skill set and the nature of the Jaguars defense, that the Vikings would be a little bit better off just kind of airing it out?
I think the Vikings would be better off airing it out just because, the Jaguars, where they struggle is getting after the quarterback and getting consistent play at corner. I mean, they're likely going to have two starters with limited experience who are rookies out there on Sunday if Sidney Jones doesn't play. And even if he does play, they're going to have some young guys in the secondary. So I think their matchups that the Vikings really have that favor them the most is at receiver and in the passing game. But with that said, we saw last week against the Browns that Gus Logue, who writes with me on Jaguar Report and does a podcast with me, he broke down Nick Chubb, how he kind of just destroyed Jacksonville's defense with outside zone runs, and he made a good point that okay, probably the only running back in the NFL who's better on outside zone than Nick Chubb is Dalvin Cook. So I mean, there's not really a scenario where it's kind of
Hmm.
a pick your poison type thing for the Jaguars this week.
All right, cool. So real quick, couple of cleanup questions. Why did the Jaguars steal Chase McLaughlin from the Vikings? Are they rude? Is that what's happening? And also, is Chase McLaughlin good? How's that special teams unit looking overall?
Man, they've had like six different kickers this year. I don't I don't think that's rude. I think that's them just trying to find a lifeboat. I've been worried about the health of their special teams coordinator all season, man. I mean, both that and impressed by his ability to learn so many names so quickly. I mean, they have just brought in it's reminding me of like a cartoon where like you see a clown car pull up and then just like endless amount of people pile out of it. That's how their kicking position been this year, dude. It's been just from a sense of injuries. So I think that was a big reason that once once I believe it was you see that this is the issue. They've had so many. I'm trying to even struggle thinking who came before McLaughlin. Oh, there you go. It was Lambo who got hurt on an onside kick. Once he got hurt, the only other
Right.
kicker they had who had yeah who
Jesus.
the only other and the first time he got hurt this season was on a squib kick, missed like a month and then got hurt on an onside kick. So he probably just shouldn't kick off ever again. But otherwise, the only other kicker they had this year who had kick games for them once Lambo got hurt that they kind of wanted to go to was Aldrich Rosas, who made 4 out of 5 against the Bengals. But Rosas was serving a 2 game suspension when a 4 game suspension that he had only served 2 games into when Lambo got hurt. So they had to turn to somebody. They found McLaughlin, who had a decent amount of starting experience, and I actually think he had probably limited sample size, but been right up there with Lambo as their best kickers this year. I mean, he had been really really consistent, and I think go as far to say as he's a good kicker. He's by far the best kicker they've had. That's not Lambo this year, and that's probably not saying a lot, but it also kind of is.
Okay. Second thing. So the thing about voting Unique Ngakwe to the Pro Bowl, I mean that's like not gonna work, right?
I want to say no, but don't ever doubt Jacksonville, man. That is a committed city. When it comes to internet trolls, that is a committed city, man. People have
Oh, I'm well
people have sent
aware.
me Facebook photos that my family has posted of me before. Not even photos I've posted, just that my family has. So when they want to get something done internet wise, they get it done. So probably won't happen, but not due to a lack of trying. Probably just due to the entire state of Pennsylvania voting T.J. Watt in.
Jesus Christ, man. All right. Hey man, thanks so much. Before before I let you go, do you have a game prediction or score prediction?
Yeah, I'm going to go Vikings 37, Jaguars 17. I think the Jaguars will be able to move the ball a decent amount in the first half with James Robinson. And the Jaguars' MO this season has kind of been keep the game close and then let things completely fall apart in the third quarter. So I think it'll probably be about a 6 to 7 point game at halftime where everybody is wondering why this game is so stupid. But then the Vikings come out in the third quarter, throw a few bombs at Jefferson and Thielen, and put it away. Yeah, I have seen this movie before. Yeah, at Jaguar Report is the Twitter account for the site, si.com/Jaguars. Put that in your browser. And then my I have 2 underscores. I know you're going to tell me I'm a psychopath. It's awful. There's lots of John Shipleys. I've heard it before. But it's _John_Shipley. And you can go ahead and follow me there. I post all of the links. Me and my team at Jaguar Report do a few different things daily.
Yeah, you are a psychopath, but no reason to go into that. Thanks so much, man. Have a good one.
All right, let's go to the mailbag, and the first question is from Mark Ward, who asks, what would be the best run of teams we'd want to face in the playoffs this year?
Yeah, so for that, we'll probably have to take a look at kind of which teams will make it. Obviously, the Vikings would be a wild card, which means that they'd have to take on a team home field. And obviously, the best version of that would be whoever plays NFC East. That's not going to happen, right? The Vikings are going to be the 7th seed. The NFC East is going to be the 4th seed. They're not going to play each other unless there's like some new playoff format I'm unfamiliar with. But I think the rest of the seeds are basically up for whoever's going to win their respective divisions. The NFC West is strong, but I don't think the top of the NFC West is as good as the Packers or actually the NFC South does not particularly scare me if Drew Brees is not healthy, and even if he is. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like the top of the NFC is just not that interesting. We covered this a little bit on the football machine, so not that bad, but essentially the options are the Saints, the Bucks, the Packers, and the Seahawks, the Rams, or the Cardinals. And any one of them can win the division. I highly suspect it's not going to be the Cardinals. So let's say between the Saints, the Seahawks, the Packers, the Bucks, and the Rams, I would say the most preferable one at this point might be the Buccaneers. And I thought that they were the best team in the NFC a month ago, which tells you a lot just about how much the NFL can change. So by the time the playoffs come around, maybe I'll have changed that answer. But I just feel like because Brady can't throw a deep ball anymore, his preferred style of offense relies a little bit more on running back receptions, and that running back core just can't get it together. I talked a little bit about that on the football machine too. That's probably the matchup you want. And of course, again, if the Vikings are the 7th seed, they'll be going against whoever the 2nd seed is. So that Buccaneers team will probably look better by then. But every team that's going to be the 2nd seed is going to be subject to that. So probably this version of the Buccaneers is who we'd want to play. After that, obviously you'd hope that the NFC East would win their game so you can play them. But let's say that that's impossible. You'd want to probably play. And they reseed in the playoffs now, right? Well, it doesn't really matter. So you'd want to play, I think, the Rams next. Like, I think after the 38-31 loss to the Rams a couple years ago after that Buffalo game, the Vikings have kind of just figured them out. So I don't know. Jared Goff just doesn't scare me. That defense is really good, and Aaron Donald could probably eat Kirk Cousins alive. But for the most part, that offense is just it's Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, and they're really good, but I just am not that threatened by the Rams. It's either them or the Saints, and then I would take the other one in the NFC Championship game. And I think playing the Saints in the NFC Championship game would have a lot of like karmic residual like feel to it because they're not as threatening as I think the Seahawks or the Packers. They could conceivably make it to the NFC Championship game, and it would feel really good beating them. Like obviously, you would feel good beating the Seahawks or the Packers in the NFC Championship game, but I don't know. It feels like beating the Saints would feel a lot better for some reason.
Well, it's also because there's a history of beating them now as well. So
yeah, and on top of that, right? Like there's the bitterness from 2009, and then the complete like sweep since then of playoffs. I mean, they've beaten the Vikings once in the regular season at least, or twice, I guess, if you want to go all the way back to 2010. But yeah, in the playoffs, I mean, the Vikings have just cleaned their clocks, and it would just feel good to do that in a more meaningful game than the wild card round.
Yeah, when I was looking at this question, my first thought was, okay, well, would this just as an internal question, would the Saints be excited or terrified? Like Saints fans be excited or terrified to see the Vikings listed as their opponent for the wild card round?
Well, based off of what I've been looking at in or last year when I was looking at Saints stuff, I think terrified. I think they think it's a weakness or like a kryptonite. Then again, they've been one and done for a while now. Like I think when the Rams, which we all know what happened with the Rams game and how they changed the rule book, but and then unchanged it. But I think the mojo would worry them a little bit.
How many one and dones have they had in the past few years? Because I'm thinking, okay, there was I think it all started after the Seahawks Beastquake game, but I don't even remember if that was a one-off. I just remember the Beastquake game.
Well, the Beastquake was a one and done, but I think that since then, was Beastquake. That wasn't 2006, right? That would have been way too long ago.
That would have been way too long ago.
Yeah, so
2011.
That was 2010.
2011.
Okay. Wow, okay, yeah. So they've
Saints were favored by 10 that game.
Yeah. Well, so 2018 they lost in the conference game. So wait, really? Sorry, that just doesn't seem right to me. What happened in 2018? Oh, they had Bridgewater on the roster. That explains it.
Yeah, well.
Was 2018 the Rams game? So that wasn't one and done. They beat the Eagles to get there. So, but they've had a lot of it's not only been one and done, but it's been a lot of one and dones because it's last year against the Vikings, and then 3 years ago against the Vikings, and then they missed the playoffs 3 years in a row, and then right before that it was another one and done in 2013, and then the one and done in 2011.
There's just been a long history of it. And I can't remember if it was a "your team sucks" thing from Drew McGarry or something like that, where a guy had written in and said something like, "When your last 4 playoff losses have nicknames, your team has gone sideways in the playoffs too many times." And it was like, wow, yeah, wow. Like the pass interference game, yep, Beastquake, the Minneapolis Miracle, yep. I forget if they call the Rudolph thing the push off or not, but they had reason to complain, I suppose. But
I would say that they had reason to complain. It's just that I think is within the bounds of penalty error, and I would say the Saints are probably right about that. But it's not as bad as the 1975 Hail Mary game.
Well,
so
no, and that. And that we're willing to go much further in depth on that. But let's go to the next question, which is from Damian Barrett, who asks, after a disappointing start to the season due to bad luck and special teams incompetence, this team has turned things around and has a chance, mathematically, of making the playoffs. If they do, is it a result of the mediocrity in the league or my skill as a fantasy football coach? That's, Damian Barrett once again is going all in on this Hall of Fame season. That's some...
Yeah.
That is really some fantastic work. You see, he missed another extra point.
You're kidding.
And won the game. It was ridiculous.
And he won the game. Oh wow.
Yep.
I think I went 3-0 this week too.
Yeah.
Jesus. How did he do that? Like, because it would be hard to do that on purpose, right?
Oh, incredible. Well, you can't pick this on purpose. Like, it doesn't work like that. The league isn't set up. It is like the bingo of football. Like, you can't just. By the way, that is a reference to the Patreon bonus material for this week. If you have not had a chance, the bonus episode is full of my opinions on bingo and Arif trying to make some wild parallels to things.
I'm just saying, I noticed a pattern. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that. In any case, no, you can't rig this. It's not something you can just do. So it would be hard to it's you can't rig a bingo game like this. It doesn't work. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but good on you,
Well, Ethel
Damien.
can rig a bingo game like this, but otherwise, yeah, I think Damien Barrett's doing
Damn you,
an
Ethel.
incredible job.
Yes.
Damon Ethel.
Logan asks, I'm of the belief that Gase is still coaching because the Jets owners feel like he's the best chance to get the number one pick, but will be fired on the way to the locker room after week 17. Why are coaches fired mid-season, Detroit, Atlanta, etc., when losing more games would be better?
Well, I think part of it is that there's an organizational belief. Usually, the GMs are not typically fired mid-season, although in Detroit they were.
This year it's been a little different.
Yeah.
It seems.
There's like an organizational belief either from the owner or from the GM that it is probably important to instill a winning culture or something like that. I am not really of the belief that losing out a season will necessarily lead to more losses or a losing culture. I think the Colts both times have demonstrated that you can lose a lot in a season and then win a lot in the very next season. I think that the Vikings have demonstrated you can have a catastrophic season and then make the playoffs the very next year 3 times already. I don't know if I believe that a losing culture is persistent from season to season. I think the bigger problems with those teams, for example, the Browns, have to do with like things like ownership, and that's not a losing culture. That's an organizational systemic problem where losing wasn't the cause of losing. And I'm incidentally obviously very happy for the Browns and Kevin Stefanski right now. But then the question is, did he just change the losing culture by being a different coach? And if that's the case, then I'm still right about that, because then it means a new coach can change a winning or losing culture and it doesn't matter whether or not you lose out. But I think that's the belief, right? That they want to be able to kind of turn things around and reinstill a culture of winning, I guess, maybe mediocrity, but reinstill a different culture. Right. And so that might be a belief. I think that there's also something to be said about how that can be a diagnosis tool, right? Because if your coach is probably the problem and you fire them because of that, there's a whole set of other things you have to figure out. Like, what are your players good at? And if you've got a different coach in there that's willing to run a different scheme, you can find out what your players are good at this season. So it provides a good evaluation tool for the front office, some film that they can work on when they determine kind of the next step for your roster. I think it also operates as a somewhat effective interview process for the interim coach. I've said a couple of times that it's very easy to get tricked by interim coaches and that interim coaches tend to underperform the following year. So I would say that that's not a wise decision, but I think that that is one of the driving factors of firing mid-years, to take a look at that interim coach. And just generally, it like feels good. Like there's nothing, it doesn't inhibit you from hiring another coach. It might inhibit you from getting the top draft pick, but it doesn't inhibit you from hiring another coach. So there's a couple of things. Plus, no one's going to feel weirded out if you bring in a guy to interview for the job. Yeah, your interim guy is going to be like, look, I'm working here. But I think for the most part, you bring in a guy to interview for the job, it's not going to feel very weird, even if you're still playing games. So it might give you a little bit of a head start on that. Plus, I mean, your interviewees will probably have a better chance to know that that job is opened up, and so they can kind of prepare their notebook or binder or whatever it is that they bring into that interview for how they intend to fix the team a little bit earlier. So there's all that.
And one could also say, in a year when fans exist in the stands, that it is something that could be kind of done as a, and I don't see meaning like throwing a bone to the fans or whatever, but just like, like recognizing the thing and trying to appease the fan base at least a little bit. It felt like, if nothing else, it felt like that's what ended up happening a bit as far as Childress was concerned. Or was it Frazier that the entirety of the stadium was chanting for his head?
I think it was Frazier, but yeah.
I was like, yeah, I think that was Frazier, actually. I think that, although when was Childress fired?
2011 must have been 2010.
I say,
right?
Was that during the regular season or was that afterwards? I feel like that was during the regular season.
Yeah, I think it was during 2010 because one of the reasons he was fired was going over everybody's head to cut Randy Moss,
That's what it
which
was.
is
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that was during the season because Frazier did become an interim coach. Yeah, he did, which is what got him the job in 2011 and 2012, and then 2013 before he got fired. And I don't think he got fired during the season in 2013. I think he stuck it out to the end.
Yeah, that must have been Childress. That there were literal signs being passed out in the audience in the dome for firing Chili. I remember that. Okay, my I guess my memory exists for that purpose only, not where did I put my car keys this morning. So good to see I'm still being as useful a human as humanly possible. Mike Ellis asks, I finally got around to reading Moneyball and the hidden inefficiencies in the value of baseball players. Is there an equivalent in football? Maybe something to explain our continued offensive line woes?
If there is, I'm not aware of it, and it's an industry secret for some team. So the problem with this question, and I like it. I don't want to say like don't ask questions like this. It's good, but problem with this question is that the nature of the advantages that they found in Moneyball were so advantageous that they kind of. I'm not going to say they kept it internal to the team because sabermetricians have been talking about this stuff for a while, but I think that it just wasn't as widely known to the general public. So I think that if I was going to identify some of the things that might be useful for that, one of the more complicated problems here is that, and I hate saying this because this is what's commonly used by anti-analytics people when they talk about why we shouldn't use analytics as much in football, is that football is a bunch of moving parts. So the problem here is that some of our kind of not most deeply held, but kind of the most well-known analytical beliefs could use a little bit more rigor when we're talking about why such and such thing, might or might not be the case. So, for example, passing more often, running a little bit less often. And I think teams should pass more often and run less often. And we've seen teams that begin to do that see a lot more benefit from it. But one of the things that is a little bit unaccounted for is kind of the way coverage changes in response to that, and whether or not we're going to see kind of more too high safety, and what efficiency looks like in that environment. I think that that's a relatively minimal example of that, but it's something kind of worth considering. And then some of the stuff that we're seeing on a play-to-play level, which I love seeing. Hey, this data indicates that we should do play action a little bit more often. This data indicates that we should do motion at the snap a little bit more often. This data indicates that we should be targeting tight ends at the 50 to 22 yard mark a little bit more often. That sort of stuff. I love seeing that because I think it's a lot more actionable for coaches and stuff like that. But that I think runs into that problem again. One really good example of when analytics kind of ran into this without taking into account field effects and selection bias is fourth down. Right now, coaches are doing a much better job of making the correct decision on when to go forward on fourth down. And a lot of that has to do with analytics, and that's great. But one of the things was that our initial fourth down models were way too aggressive. And one reason for that is because they were built off of previous fourth downs where coaches went for it. And the 4th and 1s that coaches go for are a lot different than generic 4th and 1. They are significantly closer to the line to gain. So they're usually 4th and inches, but in the playbook, they're recorded as 4th and 1. So something like a quarterback sneak is a little bit more effective when you've got about 6 inches to go versus when you've got 3 feet to go. So that's something that kind of complicated the models a little bit and has in some ways been resolved, but in some ways hasn't been. I've always been a proponent of just using third down and not using fourth down. And I didn't even realize that this was one of the issues with fourth down. I was really just kind of concerned about sample size. But here, actually, it can kind of help resolve some selection bias. And I think it's also a problem when we're discussing what to do on third and short, because the data tells us that it is much more effective to run on third and short than to pass, and the teams pass a little bit too often on third and short. Well, probably they run the ball when it's 3rd and inches. And so that complicates the data too. So that is kind of an example of where it is a little bit difficult to kind of identify what the next analytical edge is. Now, in Moneyball, obviously the biggest advantage here was not in strategy, although obviously, there have been advances in baseball strategy as a result of analytics, like, for example, the shift and, diminishing returns on stealing and bunting, and choosing not to do that as often. I don't know anything about baseball, but those are things that I think I know about the analytical movement in baseball. So there have been strategic shifts as a result of baseball analytics, but it's really just been about, as far as I know, talent identification and player acquisition. So some versions of the analytics are designed to seek out and figure out who the best players are. And sometimes it's useful for talent acquisition. Sometimes it's mostly useful for figuring out who the MVP is when you're voting. Some of them have been about, like I said, player acquisition. And some of them have just been about, trying to predict future performance, which might be more actually useful for fantasy than it is for coaches. So, that's something that is really difficult to identify in football because of the variety of skill sets involved and the fact that the skill sets are reactive and dynamic versus in baseball, where it's a little bit less like if teams get smaller and go faster at offensive line, and you decide to go bigger and run tight front against them in order to counter the wide zone, which is something teams are doing now. Now your fast offensive line looks a little bit weaker, and the counter response is to maybe get a little bit bigger. And so you're responding to the talent acquisition of the kind of the direct interplay between the players. Whereas in baseball, again, I'm an idiot. I don't know anything about baseball, but I don't think that's the case. Like, I think, as fielding metrics get better, you understand what makes a good fielder, and that doesn't really change. I don't know, but or you figure out that, like, slugging is this important and consistent contact is this important. Maybe that changes with, like, how the ball changes and the fact that home run rates increase and that people understand launch angles. I don't know, but that seems like it's a less significant problem in baseball. So with all of that in mind, I would say stuff like play action, which is something that teams are already implementing at a much higher level. Stuff like motion at the snap, which individual players are less or more comfortable with it. Like Brady, for example, doesn't really love motion at the snap. He likes pre-snap motion to help identify coverages. And you kind of just maybe want to defer to Brady on that. But yeah, I think that sort of stuff. In terms of talent acquisition with offensive linemen, man, I don't really know. I've done a lot of work trying to figure out kind of what athletic thresholds can kind of help us predict who the best offensive linemen are. I think for the most part, the NFL has solved whatever edge there is to gain there. I think that most of these teams have hired analytics departments to try and figure out, what that tells us. I think the fact that Pro Football Focus gives us things like true pass set data and success rate on true pass sets, it tells us about college production and stuff like that. And so I think that that's mainly solved, and that a lot of teams are using it as effectively as they can. And so I don't know. I would have, for example, identified Ezra Cleveland as a pretty good prospect to draft in the second round. That's what they did. And so that seems like not the cause of the Vikings issues there. I would say the players that they have drafted kind of look pretty good by a lot of analytical models, I think, except for Pat Elflein. Yeah, I think mostly you just don't want to get a guy who sucks. And I know that sounds like obvious, but like, they did draft Willie Beavers, and he was the worst pass protector in Pro Football Focus's data set that year. So I think that's mostly it. I think you can avoid some busts by avoiding players that test really poorly and look like they test poorly. And so Orlando Brown's a really good example of someone who tested poorly but did not look like someone who tested poorly. And also, we're not in the bottom half of pass protectors. And then after that, I think you kind of have to rely a lot more on traditional scouting.
Next question is from Ryan, who asks, if you had to guess the direction of the return specialist for the rest of the season, what would you expect? I think Osborne has been okay mechanically, but just needs to try to not return 98% of them. Maybe wave the arm and do the T-pose thing and let the team divert disaster?
I mean, I don't know that he's actually been all that fine mechanically. I mean, he has muffed a couple of punts. So I think that they'll continue to go through punt returners. And I think that you can't just tell a punt returner to not threaten to return it. Because teams will figure out that your guy isn't returning, and they'll kind of adjust their strategy. Like they will sacrifice hang time for distance, and now you're in a worse spot because they know you're not going to return. So I don't think you can do that. I don't know. I don't think they want to risk Thielen back there, especially since of his injury history with the back issues a couple of years ago and the hamstring issue last year. But he was a potential candidate for a hot second. I remember that. Chad Beebe, muffed that punt and has muffed punts before for the Vikings. Marcus Sherrill's his last appearance for the Vikings, he was muffing a couple of punts in a playoff game, no less. And obviously KJ Osborne has his issues. I don't know. We talked in the last episode about potentially players on the roster that might be able to do it. And if they aren't interested in elevating Alexander Hollins this week, or if they're maybe if they give Chad Beebe another week or something like that. But if Beebe is clearly not the answer over the next couple of weeks, and they decide not to elevate Alexander Hollins, then it's pretty clear that he's only a kickoff returner and not a punt returner. So there's that. Otherwise, again, there's a mailbag from a couple of weeks ago, or actually just last week, I should say, where I listed a bunch of potential return options at both punt return and kick return, some of whom are veteran free agents, most of whom are on practice squads right now across the league.
Next question is going to be from Kenneth Allen, who asks, if the Vikings lose one of the next games, will they give Cook more of a rest to avoid running him into the ground?
No, I do not anticipate that. If the Vikings are mathematically eliminated, they cannot make the playoffs. So when was the last time that actually happened for the Vikings? Because I'm trying to remember how Zimmer acts in that situation. And they were 8-7-1. They were 8-8.
There was the season.
Out of it.
Well, no, they weren't out of it. They just lost to a much worse Bears team. Is how they finally had their whimper out of the regular season.
Yeah, so we don't have a ton of precedent for this on it. Zimmer's first year they went 7-9. I don't know. Honestly, I think that they're just going to keep trying to win games to establish that winning culture. Yeah, that 7-9 game, I think that 7-9 season, they were out by about week 15. They lost 2 more games and then won against the Bears, obviously at home. And so, so what happened in that Bears game? I'm going to take a quick look just at that box score. So they played, obviously, Teddy Bridgewater. He's a rookie. He doesn't really count as somebody who would qualify for rest. That was the year that Adrian Peterson was injured, ? Yes. So they ran Matt Asiata into the ground, which doesn't tell us much. Adam Thielen and Greg Jennings got a lot of play. So there was actually no candidates for rest in this game anyway. So that actually doesn't tell us very much at all. I would say that they would continue to play Cook. Maybe they would reduce his workload from 30 touches to 25, maybe even 22. But I think that Zimmer's kind of one of those guys that really buys into the idea that if you ever kind of give up on attempting to win, you'll lose your chance to establish a winning culture.
Next question is from Ryan, who asks, for James's seminary corner, I wonder... Really? I wonder why part of the Friday episode is not dedicated to some sort of a team blessing for great fortune in the coming weekend. Are team blessings not something they covered in your seminary training? Or, more likely, is it because the Vikings are, in fact, an evil instrument intent on causing us pain, and uttering a blessing could cause the franchise as a whole to spontaneously combust?
Well,
first off, I never went to seminary, so no, that's not something that they would have covered.
That's exactly what somebody who went to seminary would say.
No. So I had made some comment though over the last week that I'd worn a priest collar briefly, and which apparently caused Ryan to die laughing about the idea that I had potentially done that and not said exactly what had happened. It's really not all that interesting a story. I promise you. It's
okay. Is it at least not like a Halloween thing?
It was not a Halloween thing, no.
Okay, that sounds hilarious then. Like I'm envisioning like a sitcom like scenario where like the priest has to be like out of the church for some wacky reason, but nobody can know. And there's like a visiting parishioner that's really important. I don't know, maybe they're a big donor. And I don't know how any of the church stuff works. Uh, and and so you can't like leave the church unattended. And so as a favor to your friend the priest, you pretend that you're one, um, and you show them around the church.
No, that is not how any of this works. And I
I think it's the truth. Actually, I think I nailed it.
I was actually expecting you to go like full heist. Like what ended up happening was they needed distractions. What they did was they sent the tall fat guy.
Right. And they knew that the security guard was really religious. So
Exactly. And so what they did was no, nothing of that sort at all. I promise. Nothing blasphemous either. There was no heist. There was
the thing I described was pretty blasphemous.
There were no plenary indulgences. There were nothing of the sort. No, what ended up happening was I had a friend who was going through seminary and had finished up and everything. He had earned his.
And you needed to swap places because he needed to grab the answers to the final.
No. Again, I tell you, this is not that interesting a story. I just happened to have. He had brought the collar for whatever reason, and I had put it on, and we ended up going out to I can't remember if we went out to eat or we went to the grocery store or something, and I still had it on, and I was getting some really odd looks, and like there was like somebody
just the collar.
Yeah, I had the collar, but I had a black jacket on. So
okay.
it had a look to it, and
right, okay.
Yeah, we just happened to. I think it was the grocery store. The woman who was that was bagging our groceries had said a few things and I didn't understand, and the guy was with had totally forgotten I was wearing it. It's like, oh, let me just get that from you real quick. I'm just like, I don't understand the signs of the thing. I wasn't raised I didn't understand, so I was like, okay. So it was not that good of a story. Your ideas were so much better than any of this. He was curious if it was actually like if it was like a super tight thing, and this one was adjustable. So no, it was totally fine. Thank you for this episode of James's Seminary Corner.
Are there like people who like provide the collars and they offer different product segments? Like this one's cheaper, but it's not adjustable. This one is more expensive. It's adjustable. This one's even more expensive. It's, I don't know, silk.
Yes, there are people who, yeah, well, like any industry. Yeah, there's people who go and sell various degrees of things for that. Yeah.
Varying degrees.
It doesn't just all come from like
collar.
one place, or it doesn't come from like one like manufacturer. No.
I mean, I guess I just never think of it. Like I knew that you could buy communion wafers, which I don't know why that's funny to me, but I just never thought about like the whole church industrial complex.
No, there's plenty of there's plenty of mechanics involved. So, but let's go to Nolan Kaler, who actually has a football question. This is a question for a Reeves football corner, which is kind of a rare thing these days. When does Dom Capers outstay his welcome? For someone who is advertised as a blitz specialist, it doesn't seem like his ideas are getting home, so to speak.
Well, I think that one's actually really difficult to evaluate, right? Like, so obviously the Vikings have not been getting a ton of pressure over the past couple of weeks. And so you could say, whatever they're doing isn't working. But I would also suggest that it is possible that they are overperforming their talent level. So in that sense, it could very well be that he's providing a positive influence on the way that the Vikings are running their defense. I think the defense overall is overperforming its talent level. And so that's something to consider. Whether or not Dom Capers is contributing to that, I don't think any of us have any idea. So obviously his primary purpose, at least according to all of the reporting that's been done, and like what Zimmer has said on a couple of occasions, is to help design pressure packages, is to help design blitzes and stuff like that. And obviously the pressure isn't there. So one could reasonably argue that he's not doing a great job. But at the same time, you would not argue that Andre Patterson, for example, is doing a good job. And that's different, obviously, because he has a track record, whereas Dom Capers' track record as a defensive coordinator is not great. So it's easier to kind of give Patterson this year off, essentially, in terms of accountability, just because of how good he's been historically. But I would say that we just don't have a ton of evidence to argue that Dom Capers is a negative influence on the way that defense is designed, especially because I think the defense is performing a little bit better than it has any right to.
Next question is from Duke's Code. It says, Arif's fleet game is top tier. Have you considered a career as a pet Instagram influencer?
So actually, this is something that Chelsea thought about with our cat, because the cat is gorgeous. Holy, like I don't know if you have access to fleets. Whoever follows me on Twitter, I think you can only access it via the app, and the app has to be updated. So if you have older versions of the iPhone or the older versions of Android or something, you don't have access to fleets. For people who don't know what I'm talking about, a fleet is an Instagram story, I guess. And for people who don't know what that is, A, don't worry about it. But
God,
B,
you are so lucky.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's fine. But it's there's a little bar at the top of the homepage now on the mobile version of Twitter where various I'm just posting pictures. So primarily it's pictures or videos that get posted that are available for about 24 hours, and then they disappear. They're fleeting, if you will. And so
is that really it? Is that
I think that's why they named it that. Like, I think it's it keeps with the Twitter branding of tweet. It's a tweet, it's a fleet, but I think also it is fleeting. I think that was their intention.
I am actually I am sickened at the moment at that. That is just,
I didn't name it.
Well, no, you know what? I think you did. I think you had something to do with this. That was an oddly specific thing for you to just say.
Well, no, I just figured out what the wordplay was that they were using. That's not my fault for being smart.
That's for being smart. Yeah, that's the only time that
I call myself an idiot twice in this episode already. Okay, I get one.
That's the only time that somebody's saying saying anything about fleets and saying anything about the word smart have anything to do with each other. Like this will be the only time.
Anyway, it's an engagement tool that Twitter uses to get people to log back into the app every single day so you don't miss a single fleet from your favorite influencers. I've been posting really beautiful pictures. And A, my cat is gorgeous. B, the Google Pixel makes every picture look professional grade. Holy, I don't do anything. And I just turn it to portrait mode, and the magical software inside of it makes it look like a professional camera with depth. I mean, the software is not perfect. Sometimes the depth adjuster is not great, but for the most part, it's really phenomenal at making photos look really great. So yeah, we thought about it with our cat, but it sounds like a stupid life, so we didn't do it.
Well, I'm not compared to the fame that you can get through here. I suppose it is a bit fleeting, isn't it?
Hey.
Yeah, well, that's about as good as the name Fleet is. Also, now that the book is written on Wentz, and to be fair, that was quite the article that was written on, I believe it was USA Today.
They're For the Win vertical at USA Today by Stephen Ruiz, which I'm absolutely linking in the show notes. Holy crap.
The moment I saw it, I was going to send it to you, and I went, no. This is something you need to see on your own, because you will see this, because I'm sure 80 people had already sent it to you. It's like, no.
Oh yeah,
this is all you. Now that the book is written on Wentz, when will you pivot towards the Trey Lance front? You can't delay it if you want to be at the forefront of the hate train.
So here's the thing. I think I can delay it and still be at the front of it, A, because of the brand equity I've built up on this, but B, if you post often enough, people will think that you're the guy. Like, you don't have to be first. For example, I wasn't the first on Mitch Trubisky can't throw left. That, as far as I know, was Derek Clausen, who actually wrote a piece to this effect. I didn't actually know about this, but who actually wrote a piece to this effect at Football Outsiders about his poor DVOA throwing to the left. I just was looking through a bunch of quarterback passing direction charts, and I had to take a look at Mitch Trubisky's, and it was pretty obvious. So I posted about it, but I posted about it often enough that I became the guy, even though Derek Clausen was the first person to write about it. So you post often enough, you're the guy. So I'll say that. But second, I'll do that as soon as it makes sense for me to be able to talk about the draft. And I can have like legitimate criticisms of Trey Lance as a prospect that I can, sandbag my brand identity to. Because you got to have like something to grab onto. You can't just say, he's bad at football and just kind of leave it at that. I think if you've got a good rant going about why they're bad, that's so much better for the brand of associating yourself with the badness of a player. Man, I've got like a really cynical presence online, don't I?
I don't know why you would even have that thought. Why would you think that you have a cynical presence online?
Well, I did build a little bit of a brand around Teddy being good, but a ton of people thought that, so I can't claim that one. But the player positivity brand stuff, I guess I back off on a little bit more, mostly because the players I like are not as good as I would want them to be. Well, at the same time, I am attaching myself to like AAF and XFL players. They're pretty much long shots, but
there's more. It's more of it's less of a risk, more of a reward situation than anything else. It is kind of like spending the $3 on bingo for like three sheets in order to win the $1,500.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Eating all of the free popcorn that's there and not spending any money on the bar. Miserable.
I'm not going to evaluate any of this metaphor.
Because you already did in the Patreon portion. Let me be perfectly clear. Ethan asks, was trading Yannick a mistake? The Vikings look like they could make a playoff run, and having a better edge defender right now would be super useful. This is for people who don't believe in the curse.
Right. So I have been a defender of Yannick Ngakoue, even as Sam has pointed out that the Vikings have done a little bit better without him, and that his pass rushing wasn't as impressive as it seems in the games that he got pressure. I actually disagree with that. I thought his pass rushing was fine in the games that he got pressure. But in Baltimore, he's had like one good game. So I would venture to say that it was probably not a mistake. He did get 4 pressures against the Colts again, but that was more a product of design and the blitz scheme that they used. They probably just could have put Matt Judon in there, who is a specialist at getting pressures without getting blocked. I don't really think that. The Vikings are not getting any pressure at all, and the fact that he's getting some sounds like an upgrade. But I think again, these are all like products of design. So I don't think that he's playing enormously well. I do find it funny that he has played the Colts twice and the Titans twice, and he started off the year in their division, but has not played a division game against them. That is interesting to me.
Next question is going to be from Chris, who asks, if the Minneapolis Miracle is the highest peak of Vikings fandom, is the Josh Freeman game the deepest valley?
Oh, man. Well, it kind of depends on what you think that, like, what was worse to watch, 38-7 or the Josh Freeman game?
I could sit and watch the Freeman game. It was damn hard. The only reason why we stayed in the bar that we were at during the Eagles game was because we were in the running to win the Super Bowl party thing that the bar was giving out in 2 weeks. Like, we were going to get a bunch of free beer and a bunch of free food. That's the only reason why we didn't leave 10 minutes into the second quarter. So, and coincidentally, we won, and because no one else was left in the bar. So, it was... I remember telling that story on the podcast, and you guys going, oh my God, that's... Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that was the only reason I was able to make it through that particular game. And then, like an idiot, I tried to rewatch it to help analyze the game. Like, no, this is terrible. This is a terrible idea. You shouldn't do it. But I was able to make it through the actual Freeman game at the time and laugh maniacally when the SportsCenter anchors came on and apologized for the terrible football that we all just watched.
He did apologize. So incredible. Yeah, so I would say the Freeman game is not the trough. I don't know if 38-7 is like the lowest valley, but I know that because it exists, that the Freeman game cannot logically be the lowest valley.
That Eagles game
Yeah,
really does feel like the universe correcting itself.
yeah, like I mean that one just feels like I don't think the San Francisco game comes close in terms of feeling, um, especially because like the San Francisco game, I think a lot of fans thought the Vikings felt lucky to be there, or the fans felt lucky to be there, whereas the Eagles game, like oh my god, they get to play a Super Bowl in their own stadium. They might have 4 consecutive home games or something in the playoffs. Holy crap! Or I guess 3 consecutive. This is a team of destiny. Go Case Keenum, etc. Holy crap, we scored on the first drive. This is going to be so easy. Whereas the San Francisco game was like, oh, yeah, no, we suck. I remember that. I remember us sucking.
That was all frustration. That was all like we were playing with house money. We all of a sudden, oh, we're down.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but we knocked out the Saints on our way over here. So
Right. Yeah, right. And I mean, the Minneapolis Miracle was this crazy high, whereas it happening literally 2 years later, and I mean, it wasn't as impressive of a play or anything like that, but it happening 2 years later against the Saints was just like, yeah, but we know what happens next. Like, no, it was like,
it was
this is a team of destiny.
It was exhilarating for the Minneapolis Miracle. It was hilarious when it happened in New Orleans. That was just beautiful. That couldn't have been scripted any better. It was just we're still collecting on that karma check. Like,
yeah, and I think the Joe Webb game, like in the playoffs, probably could have had that potential, but the way they were losing was so funny. Like you couldn't we're getting the brakes beaten off of us by the Packers, who we beat just the week before, and for some reason Adrian Peterson can't get 200 yards this game, and our quarterback just avoided getting his arm amputated. So I guess that's something to look forward to. Like it was just like it was like it felt like a game where you really could have just felt depressed, but Joe Webb played it so funny, and I love Joe Webb. I don't want to like bag on him too much, but like he played that game so hilarious that like it didn't feel like again that Eagles game where the Vikings were trying so hard and like playing football instead of doing whatever the hell Joe Webb was doing.
Did you see that Joe Webb just got like a call from a team to come in and talk?
Oh hell yes! Who called him?
I want to say it was the Giants.
Eagles nemesis quarterback could make return in NFC East. Okay, that is a very funny way to write that headline.
Well, yeah,
that is great.
It was in fact the Giants who were.
That's so good.
New York
Eagles
Post.
Nemesis quarterback. He did beat the hell out of the Eagles. Giants eyeing versatile Joe Webb to avoid Broncos-like QB design. Are you sure?
Well, he at least played the position within the last 10 years.
And I would say that he played the Packers game better than Kendall Hinton played the Saints. Wow, that was rough to say. So yeah. He has a kid. His kid's name is Joe Webb the Fourth.
Yeah.
All right. I love Joe Webb. I don't want to bag on him too much, but I don't know how many quarterbacks have also been kick returners. Yeah, so it's probably the 2009 NFC Championship game or 38-7. It's one of those two. I think those are the lowest lows for a modern Vikings fan, and the highest highs, the Minneapolis Miracle. And I want to say, given that the Eagles game was right after the Minneapolis Miracle, that is just a perfect pairing of happiness and misery, like a cursed peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Well then, next question is going to be from Kyle Slaby, who asks, now that Thanksgiving is past, can we talk about the biggest holiday of the year, which is Festivus? What are your favorite holiday traditions? Is it some special snack? Is it the plethora of holiday baking shows? Is it the feats of strength?
And listen to the podcast. It's obviously the airing of grievances.
Always. It's never anything but.
Right. The fact that my cynicism is celebrated during this holiday, I think is definitely a high point. Yeah. Festivus is fun. The airing of grievances is great. No, I mean, obviously, I like holidays for their food. Christmas hams, Christmas geese, great stuff. Butternut squash soup. I used to have that every Christmas in Vermont. I say used to because we're not going to Vermont this year. But we'll probably still try to get the butternut squash going.
All right. Next question just came in. And I just want to make a brief mention as the show has gone on, and actually, really, as the show started, a fantastic new image from Drawplay Dave emerged.
Oh God, yeah, yeah.
That is, I want to say, unsettling. I was joking with him that I'd be willing to do something for him if he made a new wreath picture for the podcast. I might need to find.
It is a masterpiece. I'm so mad.
I may need to find. I may need to talk to him after the show to see about putting this on Threadless, because this is really what you need for your Zoom ugly sweater parties this year. That is.
Now that I think about it, I do need this as a sweatshirt, huh?
Well,
Wow,
I have a picture
okay.
with my face on it, or I have a shirt with my face on it. I will say that. Beef Brewski asks, given Aaron Gleeman's recent post with a picture next to a sleeping WWF star Ken Patera, have you had any notable celebrity encounters? Maybe meeting Mark Rosen, seeing Sven's sun guard with his shirt actually on. That's funny.
That's good.
That is damn funny. Realize the show is starting to go off the rails right now, but I just want to say I appreciate that.
I have totally lost the thread of the original question now.
The original question was celebrity encounters. Anyone particularly interesting? Aaron Gleeman posted a picture this afternoon of a former WWF star from the 80s, Ken Patera, who is an Olympic strongman and WWF star, that just happened to be sleeping in his bed. And he never explained why the guy was sleeping in his bed. He just the fact that he was there. And Ken Patera was this big thing in the 80s. And a funny story about Ken Patera is he ended up going to jail because a McDonald's closed in front of him and wouldn't let him and another wrestler inside. So he decided to
like he was walking into the McDonald's, and as he was walking like across the parking lot to the door, they just closed it and locked it up.
Correct. So what he did was, he's a strong man. He literally picked up a boulder that was just outside of the McDonald's. Yep, and picked it up and threw it through the window. So
okay, I can see why you would prosecute someone for that. That seems like illegal.
It turns out you go to jail for something like that. So yeah, just of all things, Ken Patera is quite famous for that, as well as his WWF career. I believe he was also in the AWA as well, so which would be the Minneapolis ties of things. Let's go to a reef first, because I've gone off on a couple of mine. Previously.
I would say it's probably the time Chelsea and I are pretty convinced we saw Prince in a Rusty Taco. Rest in peace. He was shorter than I expected, which is how I know it was him.
Be like, did you smell the Chanel No. 5? Because it's quite present.
It was very Minnesotan. Everyone gave him space and no one acknowledged him.
That is why you settle in Chanhassen, quite frankly. I mean, it's funny because I was actually going through some old shows recently. I say recently, last night I was going through some old shows because I'm working on a Patreon thing about our old draft analysis about certain players that turned out to be good or certain players that turned out to be absolute crap. And so I was looking through some old episodes, and one of the draft episodes was the Prince episode. And so I went through a number of Prince stories that I had, including sitting in a recording session with Prince, because I went to recording school in Minneapolis, and there were a lot of ties to Paisley at that particular institution. So I ended up sitting and being a part of a recording session. I've seen him play at bunkers before in the warehouse district. That was awesome. That was really cool. I forget if I told the story on that episode, although I probably did, about being I think I was over at, there's a bar in Northeast right as you cross the Hennepin Bridge with the world's most dangerous polka band. I can't remember the name of it anymore. Nyes Polonaise. And I was at Nyes when he and John Mayer were over there, and I thought that was kind of cool. I ran into Prince in various situations like that over the course of like 3.5 years, which was awesome. Don't get me wrong. But it just, I say it like it's putting me out. Oh yeah, over about 3 years. God, you threw a nickel and you just found Prince. He was just right there. You have to squint because he's so so much further down than you. But he every single time you saw him, it was Chanel number 5, and it was strong. It was quite the smell. I believe I've told the story about I've met Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, which I thought was kind of cool. I've met David Bowie before. I've met what was it? Dan Wilson. I've been a big fan of, and I've met him a couple of times. He's listened to music I had made in college, and thought it was okay. I was like, that's the coolest thing anyone's
So
ever
wild,
said
man.
to
So
me.
We're both like, here's the thing, podcast listeners might not know. We're both like super fans of Dan Wilson, who like 99.99% of people don't know.
All they know, if you say like Dan Wilson, who's that? You go, oh, Closing Time guy.
Closing Time, yeah.
Or guy who wrote Someone Like You by Adele. Like, oh, okay. Or the guy who wrote Not Ready to Make Nice by the Dixie Chicks. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know all that.
Yeah, he's won like a couple of Grammys just for songwriting. He's won a couple of Grammys for production. He's incredible. Yeah, I know, he's incredible.
Yeah, and I've met him a couple of times, and he's always been really super cool. And he listened to some music I had made when I was still a student in college. So I thought that was really cool. Although the Trent Reznor thing I thought was kind of funny because I was making a reference to a Star Trek: The Next Generation thing at the time when I had met him, and I made a reference to it, and he laughed. And I went, okay, well, I'm good.
Done. The Costanza exit, right?
Exactly. Like, I'm out. I may not even stay for the show. Like, I'm out. I don't know if anything that would happen at that particular 2005 concert was going to be any better than that particular moment. So, HVAC Repairman asks, which Mando characters best represent you?
Okay, so we talked about this before the show, before deciding that we can't decide until we decide during the show, and this one was really hard. My first response was Carl Weathers' character, who I don't know, is his name Credo Graff or something like that. It's a Star Wars name, so it's nonsense. But it's somewhere. Where is it? I had like pulled it up. Grief Karga. Yeah, I was close. I don't know. He's like gregarious. He's kind of an asshole, but people still like him, which I would like to think is me. So there's that. But we just went back and forth. Am I the frog lady? Am I one of the eggs?
I still think I'm one of the eggs. Yes.
You might be one of the eggs. Hopefully not one. Well, I don't know. Probably spoilers at this point, but I don't know if you haven't watched this much of Mando, you probably checked out by now anyway. But yeah, hopefully not one of the eaten eggs. Is that really that much of a spoiler that some of the eggs get eaten?
No. There's plenty of interesting people to say. I was actually because
I would love to be Moff Gideon, but I'm definitely not cool enough for that.
Yeah, when I read the question, my first thought was I'm probably either the crooked accountant from one of the episodes, or I'm the just always being okay. Well, I guess I have to continue here. Okay, I can't leave. I have to keep going in this particular situation. Or the unnamed, I believe unnamed, guy who I believe ended up being the mayor and like the guy who was like celebrated at the end of the last episode, just randomly.
That was so funny. So I looked it up. His name is Lang, in show. I mean, there's so many cool characters, and I know I'm just not them. Like, I'm not Ahsoka Tano. I'm not whoever the hell Starbuck plays. I'm not any of the Mandalorians. That's way too cool. I feel like.
Well, no, I came up with the answer, if I remember correctly, in the before stuff, where I figured you were Amy Sedaris's character who just hangs out with the droids all day.
No, I mean that's funny, and she is a ton of character. I don't know that I'm her though. Like I just feel like this is so weird. I think she's too interesting to be me.
Wow.
I'm not really trying to bag on myself there.
Of all people, I would have expected to have low self-esteem at that particular moment.
That's not. It's not like a statement about high or low self-esteem. She is just like a lot of person at once, and sometimes I'm not. I think I'm going to go back to my original choice, which is Grief Karga. Which, man, what a terrible name! Some of these Star Wars names, man. Like I'll defend a lot of Star Wars unnecessarily, as we know. Um, but some of these Star Wars names, dude.
Yeah, not their best work. Although Mandalorian is pretty great. Don from Ohio asks, if Delvin Cook was a car, how many miles would he have on him by now? We're at least at like 150,000 from just this season alone.
Yeah. So the problem is that he's been in a couple of car crashes before then, right? And so
I
the mileage
suppose.
number, the mileage number is a little bit misleading. So whichever team picks up his next contract, oh, that's the Vikings. You get the Carfax report. But yeah, well, he's been in two car crashes, right? He's missed 2 seasons due to injury. He's missed a couple of games too. I would say from that, it's probably a couple of car crashes and 100,000 miles, maybe 80,000. But it's at the point where the mileage number is concerning only because we know about the car crashes.
It could be one of those situations too where when the ACL happened, it was major work and someone in the back ended up rolling back the numbers on it too. So it's a bit, his numbers are a bit deceptive this year. Also, I have a legal question for you, gents. So apparently we're going back to Arif's legal corner.
I'm not a lawyer. I just want this to be clear. This is not legal advice.
Last Christmas, I purchased a BB gun for my nephew. Despite concerns from others about his safety using it, I knew how much it would mean to him. He loved that BB gun. Here's some pictures of him and his parents that I took during the opening of his present. They are exactly what you expect. What you would expect this is. Yeah. Anyone over the age of 8 knows where this is going. Unfortunately for my nephew, a freak accident with his BB gun caused great harm to his eye as well as breaking his glasses. I know my nephew was careful, but I don't understand how this could happen. I did notice there wasn't a warning on the box that the BB gun could cause physical harm to himself or others. My legal question: can my nephew and his parents sue the company for not having, a warning on the box on how dangerous the toy is? If so, what's the compensation?
All right, so I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything about law. My first answer is I think that this kind of depends on reasonability standards. I think is what courts typically defer to. Like I know it doesn't seem like that based off of all the warnings that we have on products and stuff like that. But I think it's just would a reasonable person know that this would be a risk? And so if it would be the case that everyone told your nephew that he'll shoot his eye out if he gets a BB gun, then I don't think you've got good legal standing. So that is my understanding. I think there is at least one person who has passed a bar exam in the States who listens to this show. Please do not respond.
I do not need correcting. I know that I am full of crap. Well, we're episode titles are just rolling off our tongues tonight. Jeez. That is impressive. Well, that is going to be it. Well, you should have just got him the bunny outfit. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. We hope you have enjoyed it. Once again, the live show will be on Thursday, December 10th at 7 p.m. Central U.S. time. If you would like access to that, you can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode, sign up for $3.50 a month, and you will get the link before we do the actual show. People who are members of Patreon will be the only people who will be able to access this live show and have your answer or have your question potentially answered by Arif and I during the show. Also, the January 3rd Zoom watch along will be happening during the Lions game at noon on January 3rd next year. It might actually come. It might.
we might see a 2021, but I'm not gonna.
not gonna hold your breath. Just there's a real chance, and no games have been canceled, so we'll.
No games have been canceled.
We'll see. So, Arif, where can they find your work?
Yeah, head over to theathletic.com /author/Arif-Hassan. I've written a couple of pieces there. I'm also going to write a piece So yeah, I wrote about Kirk Cousins. I wrote the Players of the Week. I am going to be writing a piece soon on how much we should value the Steelers, right? Because they're undefeated, but they've got a bunch of like really uninspiring wins. So that's going to come up probably not this week, but next week. But just got approved for that assignment.
And, the Steelers are going to have like 2 more games by the time you end up writing that piece as well. So,
yeah.
There's gonna be
it's gonna be fun.
Like, well, I started writing it, and then, well, games happened. No canceled games this year, though. Absolutely not.
No canceled games.
Thank you. We keep referencing this Adam Schefter tweet that at best was in poor taste. At best was in poor taste. It's like, oh, no canceled games this year, though. Like, really, dude? All right. Well, that is going to be it again for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Again, if you are interested in the live stuff over at patreon.com/Norse Code, please sign up over there. Otherwise, for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the football game, and we will be back next week to hopefully talk about the win over the Jaguars. But until then, please remember that all things are possible through Ben DiNucci. When we will see you next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.